Have you ever imagined that an entire city could be enveloped by a secret so dark that no one dared speak of it aloud? A crime so profound, so enigmatic, that it left invisible marks on the daily lives of every resident, transforming seemingly ordinary streets into scenes of fear and suspicion. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover could completely change the way you view real-world mysteries, especially those linked to cults, sects, and secret societies that operate in the shadows. Far from the eyes of the law and the understanding of most people, it all began as a seemingly ordinary disappearance, one of those believed to be isolated cases or accidents that the town quickly tried to forget. But as the investigation progressed, clues emerged of something much larger, more complex, and frightening. Reports from residents, frightened witnesses, and enigmatic records pointed to strange activities, secret rituals, and symbols that no one could decipher. What seemed like an isolated incident began to reveal mysterious connections, suggesting that hidden forces were at work, manipulating events and involving innocent people in situations that defied any rational explanation. The city's atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly but steadily. Small signs of tension began to appear. Once bustling streets seemed too quiet, conversations stopped when strangers approached, and fear began to creep into everyone's homes and minds. The authorities tried to maintain order, but the complexity of the case and the involvement of a secret group with unknown methods created a sense of helplessness. Each clue found seemed to open a new layer of mystery, and each testimony raised more questions than answers. It is in this context that the story of the crime that changed the city begins to unfold, revealing elements that seem straight out of a fiction book, but are terrifyingly real. What makes this case even more fascinating and disturbing is the fact that, behind closed doors and clandestine meetings, there existed a group whose intentions were obscure but meticulously planned. Every action seemed charged with a meaning that only the initiated could grasp, while ordinary residents were drawn into a labyrinth of mysteries with no way out. Imagine living in a city where no one could fully trust anyone, where hidden secrets shaped lives and destinies, and where the simple act of asking questions could put you in the crosshairs of forces operating silently but with devastating impact. Have you ever experienced situations where the normal seemed strange and the strange seemed normal? Well, that's exactly the feeling that gripped the city during the events of this inexplicable crime. The disappearances, the enigmatic signs, and the rumors of secret rituals began to spread like a virus, and each new detail seemed more unbelievable than the last. People wondered, how could something so secret remain hidden for so long? How could a crime so disrupt the routine of an entire city, leaving scars that many still try to ignore? But the truth is that behind every locked door, every suspicious look, and every untold story, there was a secret that couldn't be revealed so easily. And it's precisely at this point that the case becomes unforgettable. It blends the real with the inexplicable, everyday fear with absolute mystery, creating a narrative that challenges not only logic, but also the courage of those who dare to investigate. What you'll discover next isn't just a common crime. It's a gateway to a world where secret societies, enigmatic cults, and unknown forces shape destinies, leaving clues that challenge even the most experienced investigators. And so, amid shadows and whispers, this story begins, ready to reveal details no one has dared to tell before. But what really happened in that city? What forces were at work? And how did this forever change the lives of those who lived there? What you'll see in the next few minutes is just the beginning of a mystery that defies explanation and remains, to this day, shrouded in secrecy. Have you ever wondered how a seemingly ordinary city can hide secrets so deep that no one dares to speak about them? Imagine bustling streets, open shops, and residents greeting each other with smiles. While behind this tranquil facade, dark forces operate silently, weaving a web of mysteries and crimes that no one notices at first glance. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you and make you look at seemingly peaceful cities with new eyes, always questioning what lurks in the shadows. We're talking about a time when the city went about its daily life normally, between markets, schools, and small factories that employed most families. The population trusted their routines and believed they knew every neighbor, every street, every story that circulated in the cafes and squares. But while everyone thought life followed its predictable course, something very different was unfolding beyond the watchful eye. Small signs went unnoticed, closed doors that never opened, discreet encounters in secluded places, and a growing sense that something was wrong. Even if no one could pinpoint exactly what, the city's social climate was, on the one hand, ordinary and welcoming, but on the other, it carried a mystery that few dared to speak of. Stories of unexplained disappearances, secret meetings, and strange symbols circulated in whispers, and those who tried to investigate found themselves faced with obstacles that went far beyond logic. Have you ever experienced situations where the normal seems strange and the strange seems normal? Well, that was precisely the feeling that hung over the city at that time. Every seemingly banal detail hid layers of secrets and practices that defied the population's comprehension. Culturally, the city had its traditions, festivals, and celebrations that brought the entire community together. But even in these moments of apparent joy, something was off. Residents' accounts spoke of gatherings that took place at night, away from the lights and noise, rituals that left symbolic marks in places no one frequented during the day, and voices that seemed to tell stories no one wanted to hear. What no one knew was that, behind the tranquil routine, dark forces were at work, shaping destinies and involving innocent people in situations beyond imagination. The streets that seemed safe during the day hid corridors of mystery and secrets known only to the initiated. Every corner, every ancient building, every wooded area near the city held fragments of a dark history intertwined with everyone's lives. And while the population continued their daily lives, believing in the normalcy of what they saw, inexplicable events began to take shape, suggesting that something larger and more dangerous was about to unfold. Can you feel this tension? It's as if the city breathed a different air, charged with secrets no one dared reveal, and each inhabitant was somehow connected to something they didn't fully understand. What you'll discover in the next few minutes isn't just a crime or an isolated mystery. It's the story of how a secret society, a shadowy cult, managed to operate for years unnoticed, leaving traces that would forever change everyone's perception of the city and its seemingly peaceful routine. And it is exactly at this point that we begin to realize that what seemed like just an ordinary setting, with its streets, squares, and quiet houses, hid layers of mystery, danger, and unsolved mysteries, preparing the ground for the events that would soon shock and forever transform the lives of those who lived there. Have you ever wondered how much evil lurks beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary city? Imagine waking up on a normal day and suddenly discovering that someone close to you has disappeared without a trace, without a note, without any plausible explanation. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you and reveal how a single crime can forever change the life of an entire community, leaving a trail of mystery, fear, and questions no one can answer. It all began with the disappearance of a young woman known for her quiet routine and predictable habits. No one imagined that, upon leaving home that morning, she would become part of one of the city's most enigmatic cases. Initial investigations revealed nothing suspicious. It seemed like an isolated case, just another person missing under ordinary circumstances. But as the days passed, strange details began to emerge. Unexplained signs, cryptic messages left in unusual places, misplaced objects, and witnesses who swore they saw or heard things that made no sense. What seemed like an ordinary disappearance would soon turn into a mystery that would shock the entire city. Shaking up everyone's routine, fear, and trust, the subsequent victims followed an equally disturbing pattern. Each seemed chosen at random, yet at the same time there was something connecting them all, whether it was a disrupted routine, a specific behavior, or even the proximity of places frequented by a secret group. No one could understand why these people were targeted, and the climate of insecurity began to spread rapidly. Residents began to eye the streets and homes with suspicion, and even places previously considered safe began to be avoided. The entire city was at the mercy of a puzzle no one knew how to solve. What makes this crime even more intriguing are the unexplained elements surrounding each disappearance. Witness accounts mentioned strange sounds in the early morning hours, mysterious lights in abandoned houses, and hooded figures who disappeared before being approached. Official documents were quickly sealed, and investigations seemed to encounter an invisible roadblock at every turn. It's as if something or someone was controlling everything behind the scenes, keeping the mystery alive while simultaneously terrifying those trying to get closer to the truth. Have you ever experienced this? The feeling that something larger, unknown, and incomprehensible is manipulating the events around you without you being able to do anything to stop it? And while the city struggled to maintain its normal routine, crime began to cast an invisible shadow over every resident. Unanswered questions multiplied. Who would be the next victim? What motivated these actions? And most importantly, who was behind it all? Every detail, every clue, seemed intentionally designed to confuse and instill fear, creating an atmosphere of constant tension that seeped into homes, streets, and even people's minds. What you'll discover next isn't just about victims or suspects. It's about how a single crime triggered a chain of events that defy logic, reason, and even the safety of an entire city. As we delve deeper into this case, we begin to realize that the events are not just criminal, but also fraught with elements that seem supernatural, as if something larger were operating in the shadows, guiding every movement, every disappearance, and every closely guarded secret. And it's at this point that the story really starts to become terrifying, leaving the feeling that at any moment new discoveries could shock the city even further and reveal a reality that no one was prepared to face. Have you ever wondered how far the human mind is capable of going when fueled by forbidden secrets and beliefs that defy logic? Imagine discovering that behind a series of mysterious disappearances and unexplained crimes, there was a secret organization operating in the city, whose actions were carefully planned and shrouded in rituals that no one outside the group could understand. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you and forever change the way you view the influence of cults and secret societies in real life, especially when their dark practices cross the line between ritual and crime. The cult in question wasn't just a gathering of eccentric individuals. It was an organized network, with leaders who exercised absolute control over their members and doctrines that demanded complete loyalty. Every ritual, every symbol, every gesture had a hidden purpose, often incomprehensible to outsiders. Secrets that no one dared speak of were kept under lock and key, but the crime that shook the city ultimately revealed frightening fragments of this hidden universe. Accounts from residents and recovered documents pointed to practices that went far beyond what conventional society accepted, involving strange symbols, secret nocturnal meetings, and rules that bordered on the supernatural. The victims didn't disappear by chance. There was an invisible pattern, a deliberate choice that connected each incident to the group and its beliefs. Some residents claimed to have heard strange chants, heavy footsteps in places that should have been empty, or seen hooded figures conducting ceremonies that no one could explain. It was as if the entire town had become the stage for a macabre play, where only the initiated knew the rules, and everyone else was merely spectators forced to watch without being able to intervene. Have you ever experienced this? The feeling that something is happening right under your nose, but that you can't fully comprehend. What makes this story even more disturbing is the cult's duality. On the surface, its members appeared to be ordinary citizens, working, socializing with neighbors, and participating in local events. But behind this everyday facade, they followed obscure rituals that reinforced the group's control and kept its secrets hidden. Ancient documents and confidential accounts suggested that these rituals were not merely symbolic. They were directly linked to the crimes that shocked the city. Each disappearance, each unexplained event, seemed to follow a pattern that only members of the secret society could decipher. Over time, rumors arose that the cult leaders possessed knowledge and abilities no one dared question, manipulating fears, psychological pressures, and even superstitions to keep members faithful and victims powerless. People who tried to distance themselves disappeared, and those who dared to investigate further were faced with nearly impossible obstacles. Fear spread silently, creating an atmosphere in which any attempt to uncover the truth seemed too risky. And yet, the fragments that escaped the group's vigilance were enough to deeply frighten the population. And it's at this point that we begin to understand how a cult or secret society, often invisible to the public eye, can shape the reality of an entire city. The connection between dark beliefs, secret rituals, and unexplained crimes creates a puzzle that challenges not only logic, but also the sense of security of those who live in that environment. What you'll discover next will reveal details about these rituals, the group's influence over its victims, and the web of mystery that stretches far beyond what any official investigation has been able to unravel so far. Have you ever wondered what happens when the truth seems to slip through your fingers? Even in the face of the most thorough investigation, imagine an entire city immersed in fear and distrust, where each unexplained disappearance becomes a piece of an impossible puzzle to put together. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you and reveal how some crimes, despite the authorities' best efforts, remain shrouded in mysteries that defy logic and human understanding. Official investigations began soon after the first disappearances, with police, detectives, and experts trying to follow leads that often seemed to lead nowhere. Detailed reports, witness interviews, and thorough searches failed to explain some strange occurrences, signs that mysteriously disappeared, objects positioned in unusual ways, and witnesses who swore they saw shadowy figures in places no one should be. Each new detail seemed to raise more questions than answers, and the city began to realize it was facing something far beyond a common crime. Witnesses reported events that defied reason, unexplained lights in abandoned houses, footsteps or voices in the middle of the night, and people disappearing without a trace. Some of these stories were so disturbing they seemed straight out of horror movies, but everyone who told them swore they were true. Official documents cited evidence that was never fully explained, and investigators confessed behind the scenes that certain phenomena seemed to surpass the limits of what they considered possible. Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain and felt like the world around you was hiding something important? That's exactly the feeling that hung over the city. Meanwhile, theories began to spread like wildfire, some well-founded, others purely speculative. Residents discussed possible cults, secret societies, and obscure practices that could be linked to the crimes. Some believed in supernatural motives. Others pointed to well-organized conspiracies manipulating events almost invisibly. The town was divided between skepticism and genuine fear, and each new unsolved clue reinforced the sense of collective helplessness. Despite all the authorities' efforts, some questions still remain unanswered. Why were certain people singled out as victims? What forces were at work behind the inexplicable events? And perhaps most disturbingly, how could someone operate with such impunity, even with the full attention of the investigation? Each attempt at a solution seemed only to reveal new layers of mystery, and tension within the city grew by the day, the feeling that something greater was at work. Manipulating every movement and every discovery made the atmosphere almost suffocating. The population lived on constant alert. Every noise or shadow provoked unease, and even those not directly connected to the events felt the weight of collective fear. It was as if the city had become a territory where human logic was no longer enough, and where crimes and disappearances intertwined with enigmas that seemed impossible to decipher. And it is in this setting that the unsolved mysteries deepen, leaving traces that challenge both the police and any experienced investigator. Each account, each strange piece of evidence, each uncertain theory contributes to the feeling that the city hides secrets that may never be fully revealed. What you'll discover in the next few minutes will delve even deeper into these enigmas, revealing how a seemingly isolated crime managed to transform everyone's routine, fear, and perception, leaving scars that remain invisible but undeniably present. Have you ever stopped to think how a single crime can completely change the life of an entire city? Imagine streets once filled with laughter and quiet conversation, now plunged into silence, suspicious glances, and doors that close earlier. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you, showing how a crime is not just an isolated event, but a catalyst that transforms routine, fear, and even the very identity of a community. After the mysterious events and unexplained disappearances, the city was never the same. The once confident and carefree population began to live under constant tension. Residents eyed their neighbors with suspicion, avoided streets and houses that were once common, and every strange sound at night made their hearts race. The sense of security disappeared, and collective fear spread like an invisible shadow, touching every home, every school, every street corner. Have you ever experienced this? The feeling that the world around you changed without warning, and that normalcy would never be the same again. Authorities also felt the impact. Police and investigators worked tirelessly to understand the crime patterns, find answers, and ensure public protection, but they encountered obstacles that went far beyond what they expected. Official reports and records began to reflect the complexity of the case. Clues mysteriously disappearing, contradictory witness accounts, and events that defied any logical explanation. Every attempt to restore normalcy seemed only to deepen the mystery, reinforcing the climate of insecurity that spread among residents and local leaders. The crime also left profound marks on local culture. The city's routine changed. Parties and community gatherings were scaled back or altered, and the once existing sense of unity was replaced by caution and suspicion. Small changes in daily life reflected the invisible impact of the terror that had taken hold. Once bustling streets began to empty earlier, merchants began to lock their shops more strictly, and even children felt the change, noticing that something in the air was different. No one in the city ever looked at their own neighborhood the same way again. Every street, every house seemed to carry a weight of secrets and unsettling memories that no one could ignore. Beyond collective fear, social and legal changes emerged. New laws and regulations were discussed to increase security. Surveillance measures were intensified, and the city began investing in prevention strategies never before considered. But no matter how many changes were implemented, the trauma persisted. The population had witnessed, even if indirectly, the power of a crime that crossed barriers and defied logic. And this realization transformed the way everyone interacted and related. The emotional and psychological impact was also felt intensely. Parents began to monitor their children more closely. Neighbors hesitated to get involved in unfamiliar situations, and the feeling of vulnerability became part of everyday life. The crime wasn't just an event, it was a watershed moment, something that redefined the perception of safety, altered habits, and left scars that, though invisible, remain vivid in the city's collective memory, and it's precisely at this point that we realize how a single, seemingly isolated crime can reverberate far beyond its direct victims, shaping behaviors, influencing decisions, and casting a shadow that touches every corner of the city. What you'll discover in the next few minutes will reveal even more about these consequences, showing that the mystery, fear, and tension remain alive, even when routine seems to try to move on. Have you ever wondered if there are mysteries that simply won't be solved? Those events that defy logic, that leave trails of unanswered questions, and that remain alive in the collective memory like silent shadows looming over an entire city. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you and will show how certain crimes, shrouded in secrets and rumors, can transcend time, human understanding, and even reason, transforming common tales into legends that no one forgets. Ever since the first disappearances and unexplained crimes, theories began to emerge, attempting to make sense of it all. Some were more rational, pointing to secret societies or shadowy cults with hidden motives. Others were almost supernatural, speaking of invisible forces manipulating events, rituals altering reality, and coincidences impossible to explain. Each theory fueled the fear, curiosity, and obsession of those trying to understand what really happened. Have you ever experienced this? The feeling that something is happening right under your nose, but you can't quite grasp it. Rumors began to circulate around the city, some from direct witnesses, others merely whispered in cafes, markets, and squares. Some spoke of hooded figures seen on the streets at night, others of strange symbols left in places no one visited during the day. Each report deepened the mystery and raised new questions. Were they coincidences or evidence of a greater plan? Some residents claimed that the cult or secret society involved possessed knowledge beyond human understanding, and that certain events could only be explained by forces that defy logic. As official investigations encountered obstacles and clues mysteriously disappeared, theories gained even more traction. Psychologists, journalists, and amateur investigators attempted to analyze patterns, compare accounts, and seek rational explanations. But the city seemed to be deliberately guarding its secrets. Each new piece of information raised more questions than answers, and the line between reality, superstition, and legend became increasingly blurred. What seemed to be an isolated case of crime turned out to be an enigma involving supernatural mysteries, secret cults, and an almost palpable suspense. And it is precisely this ambiguity that keeps the city and its residents in constant reflection. Fear of the unknown blends with fascination with the inexplicable, and each person is invited to imagine scenarios that defy reason. Some believe there will never be a complete explanation. Others insist on searching for fragments of truth hidden among reports, documents, and symbols that resist any definitive interpretation. What you will discover in the next few minutes will allow you to explore these possibilities, reflecting on every detail, every event, and every mystery that still remains unsolved. Most disturbingly, even years later, some fragments of the truth remain inaccessible. Evidence that could shed light on the case seems shrouded in secrecy, and what really happened that night remains shrouded in shadow. The city harbors memories, fears, and secrets that intertwine in ways no one can fully unravel. And while theories and rumors continue to circulate, the public is invited to imagine, speculate, and confront their own perception of what is real and what is unknown. What really happened that night? Who was behind the disappearances and unexplained events? And perhaps most disturbing of all, will the truth ever be revealed? The answer may never be known, but the mystery, fear, and curiosity remain, ready for you, the viewer, to delve even deeper and try to understand what truly lurks behind the shadows of this story. And as you delve into this mystery, feeling the weight of unanswered questions and imagining the darkest scenarios that could have unfolded in that city, I want to invite you to join this conversation in an even closer way. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what resonated with you or which theory you believe is most likely. Sharing your opinion not only helps create a community of people who, like you, are interested in true crime, mysteries, and secret societies, but also allows other viewers to discover different perspectives, expanding their understanding and fascination with these types of stories. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into unexplained events and want to continue following cases that defy logic and reason, don't forget to leave a like. Liking the video helps the channel grow and allows more people interested in mysteries, supernatural crimes, and accounts of secret cults to find this content, immersing themselves in this intriguing and suspenseful world. Also, if you're not already subscribed, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Your participation is what keeps this channel delivering detailed, engaging, and well-researched stories, with narratives that captivate from beginning to end. Every comment, every like, every subscription keeps alive the possibility of uncovering more mysterious cases, analyzing new events, and building a community that, like you, seeks to understand the inexplicable and reflect on the secrets surrounding our reality. And as you share your thoughts and interact, the story we're exploring continues to unfold, revealing even more disturbing details about the crime, the unsolved mysteries, and the secrets that remain hidden in the city's shadows. Would you believe that an entire city was terrorized by a secret no one dared reveal? Think for a moment: bustling streets, children playing, crowded markets, people greeting each other with smiles and friendly gestures. And at the same time, something deep, dark, and carefully hidden was unfolding in the shadows, forever changing the lives of everyone who lived there. It's hard to imagine, but the truth is that not everything that seems safe, familiar, or everyday is truly what it seems. There are layers of reality that most people never perceive, and when these layers are touched by unexpected events, the transformation of the city, the mindset of its residents, and even the relationships between neighbors can be profound and lasting. It all started with small signs that no one noticed. Objects out of place, whispers that seemed to come from empty spaces, people whose behavior changed without explanation. These are subtle details that, at first glance, might seem trivial, but when analyzed together, they formed a complex web of mysteries, secrets, and decisions beyond the comprehension of those who lived there. It's fascinating to realize how, in many situations, the most impactful events arise silently, almost unnoticed, and only become visible once their impact has already taken hold. Have you ever experienced something similar when you realized your routine had been altered without you noticing immediately? The feeling is that the ground you were standing on is no longer firm, and that invisible decisions were being made by forces you didn't even know about. What makes this case even more intriguing is the complexity of what was at stake. This wasn't just an isolated crime or a random event. There was a network of factors, a hidden truth that shaped every movement, every decision, and every reaction of the people involved. The city began to slowly transform. Once welcoming streets became silent, looks became suspicious, and simple habits were altered by a growing sense that something was wrong. This transformation was not only physical, but also emotional and psychological. Each person involved, consciously or not, went through a kind of internal journey, confronting fears, expectations, and their own perception of reality. The impact of all this was reflected in interpersonal relationships, collective trust, and even in the way the community organized itself in the face of events that seemed to be spiraling out of control. And as residents tried to understand what was happening, contradictory clues emerged, fragmented accounts, and signs that seemed intentionally left to confuse. Each fragment of information required careful analysis, subjective interpretation, and often the courage to confront the unknown. It is at this point that curiosity becomes a powerful tool, questioning, investigating, And reflecting on what presents itself before us is part of understanding the complexity of the situation, even if not all answers are available. The journey of those seeking the truth, therefore, is not linear. It is made of ups and downs, of discoveries that shock and revelations that defy even common sense. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, exploring how these early signs and secrets that no one dared reveal began to connect in frightening ways. Imagine that every strange behavior, every inexplicable gesture, and every seemingly trivial decision was part of the city's internal logic, as if everything were interconnected by a kind of invisible code that only a select few understood. The feeling that everything is connected, that invisible forces shape reality as we act, provokes a mixture of fascination and fear. It is precisely this tension that keeps our attention alive and makes every detail, no matter how small, gain relevance. As we progress, we realize that what seemed like just a sequence of isolated events transforms into a coherent yet unsettling narrative. The city, which once seemed peaceful and predictable, begins to reveal an unexpected dimension. Habits, decisions, and even small coincidences begin to take on a different meaning. Like pieces on a board, someone moved in the shadows. It's impossible not to wonder how many of these signs could have been noticed before. How many hidden truths were within reach of the attentive eye, but no one noticed. This reflection leads us to consider not only what happened on the surface, but also what unfolds behind the scenes, the inner workings of fear, and the profound impact that secrets can have on an entire community. And it is at this point that the narrative gains momentum. The streets, the residents, the individual and collective stories begin to intertwine, forming a web of events that defies simple explanation. The city is no longer just a setting. It becomes a silent protagonist, shaping and being shaped by the mystery that permeates it. Every corner, every house, every seemingly ordinary gesture takes on meaning. Every decision made by residents, authorities, or those directly involved takes on a new dimension, revealing how the crime and its attendant secrets affected not only the surface of the city but also the mindset of everyone who inhabited it. The fascination with this type of story stems precisely from this combination of reality and mystery, of facts and possibilities that intertwine, leaving room for reflection. The feeling that something greater is at work behind the scenes, influencing behaviors, decisions, and even the perception of reality itself, creates an almost hypnotic effect. It's as if the city, with all its streets, houses and inhabitants, is participating in a unique experiment in which every seemingly trivial detail can conceal a hidden truth that alters the entire narrative. This perception transforms the way we observe not only events, but also everyday life itself, revealing that there is always more than meets the eye. And as you reflect on all this, you realize that every fragment of the story, every account, and every clue that emerged in the early stages of the investigation contribute to a deeper understanding of the impact of this crime. It's not just about fear or curiosity. It's about understanding how a secret, a decision, or a seemingly isolated event can transform an entire city, change mindsets, and create a chain of effects that ripple out in unexpected ways. It's this complexity that keeps the story alive, that provokes questions about human nature, about choices, responsibilities, and the power of invisible forces that shape our perception of reality. Comment below. I'm on this journey too, and share which detail of this story caught your attention or touched you the most. Imagine for a moment walking through a city that, at first glance, seems completely ordinary. Wide, well-kept streets, squares filled with children playing and people greeting each other with friendly smiles. Cars passing calmly, the smell of fresh bakery in the air, and the sense of tranquil routine, typical of a community that prides itself on its stability. It's easy to believe that everything there is safe, predictable, even comforting. But what no one knew is that behind this tranquil facade, dark forces were at work, slowly transforming the daily lives of the population and shaping events that would never be forgotten. We're talking about a time when the city was still at a point of transition, a blend of tradition and modernity, where old customs coexisted with emerging technologies and new forms of communication. People still trusted their neighbors and local institutions and felt a sense of belonging that gave them the confidence to leave home without a second thought. There were cafes full of lively conversation, markets with merchants who knew each customer by name, and schools that functioned as hubs of social interaction. Every element of the landscape conveyed a sense of normalcy, stability, and routine. However, this appearance of calm was only superficial. Beneath it, decisions and events unfolded silently, almost imperceptibly, leaving traces of emotional and psychological transformation in every individual in the city. Residents lived with the mindset that they knew how the world around them worked, but they would soon discover that this perception was about to be challenged. Small occurrences began to suggest that not everything was as it seemed. Reports from neighbors of strange sounds at night, objects out of place, shadows that seemed to move with their own intentions began to multiply. The entire city was becoming, without realizing it, the stage for a hidden narrative, a story that transcended the daily routine and invaded the realm of doubt, fear, and fascination. Each sign, no matter how discreet, carried the weight of a hidden truth, an invisible impact on collective perception that shaped how each person viewed their own reality. The social climate was beginning to shift without many consciously noticing. Once relaxed cafe conversations became punctuated by watchful glances and cautious whispers. Children began to hear unusual stories, urban legends that blended fantasy with supposition and rumor. Adults, for their part, felt a growing unease within them, a kind of silent tension that altered simple decisions, like when to close a window or where to walk at night. The city, which had previously seemed static, began to transform under the influence of mysterious events that were still slowly revealing themselves. The cultural impact was also felt. Parties, celebrations, and gatherings that were once marked by joy and interaction began to take on an air of caution. Every detail, every community ritual seemed to carry greater weight, and people couldn't shake the feeling that they were part of something larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. The transformation wasn't just physical, but emotional and mental as well. Trust in others, the perception of safety, and the very notion of normalcy began to be questioned. Each resident, consciously or unconsciously, participated in a silent journey of adaptation, trying to understand the signs and protect themselves from the impact of these events. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, analyzing how these subtle changes, these invisible forces, and the tense atmosphere began to intertwine with the mysterious events that were to come. Imagine that every street, every house, and every daily habit became part of an intricate mosaic of decisions, secrets, and transformations. What was once predictable, controllable, and safe began to be shaped by unknown elements, by the presence of secrets hidden behind the scenes, and by the influence of events that logic could not fully explain. The city, with all its facades of tranquility, became a living organism, reacting almost invisibly to the forces moving silently. Collective perception, the mindset of residents, the emotional impact on the community, and even small everyday decisions began to reflect an altered reality, where mystery was not just an isolated detail, but a constant presence permeating every corner. Every shadow, every noise, every change in behavior began to carry meanings that only the attentive could perceive, revealing a narrative that unfolded slowly, but with profound and transformative effects. What's fascinating about this scenario is realizing how we are often shaped by forces we can't directly see, by events that unfold silently, and by secrets that remain invisible until the right moment. The city, with all its seemingly ordinary routine, was witnessing a subtle yet powerful transformation that affected every individual, every social group, and every aspect of community life. This insight leads us to reflect on the complexity of human interactions, on how seemingly small decisions can reverberate in unexpected ways, and on how hidden truths often shape reality in ways that only become perceptible when we look back. Now, imagining all these nuances, it's possible to realize that every detail of daily life, every gesture, and every decision of the population was connected to a larger web of events yet to unfold. The city wasn't just a backdrop. It was a silent protagonist, carrying with it memories, impacts, and revelations that would shape the perception of all who inhabited it. Every corner, every house, and every square became part of a larger story, where transformation, mystery, and hidden truth intertwined, creating an atmosphere of tension, fascination, and reflection that continued to grow with each passing day. Comment below. This makes sense to me. And tell me which detail of this city context caught your attention the most. Can you imagine the feeling of walking the streets of a city that, until then, seemed completely safe, and suddenly realizing that something terrible had happened there? Something that would forever change everyone's perception of the world around them. What seemed like an ordinary disappearance would soon turn into a mystery that would shock the entire city, involving not only innocent victims, but also a series of inexplicable elements that defied all logic. At first, residents tried to rationalize. Someone had left too late, gotten lost, or made a rash decision. But it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary thing, and that unseen forces, dark decisions, and deep secrets were shaping a reality no one could fully comprehend. The victims were ordinary people, living in the middle of the city, going about their daily lives. Yet they were caught up in something that seemed beyond human control. Each disappearance brought with it disturbing details, objects disappearing without explanation, enigmatic marks in places no one should have access to, witnesses describing silhouettes or figures at moments impossible to have witnessed. All of this created a climate of tension, curiosity, and fear, because the population sensed something deeper was happening, something infiltrating the city's background, stirring the collective psyche and impacting decisions, habits, and behaviors silently but powerfully. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic and understand how these early events began to create a complex web that extended throughout the community. Imagine that every detail, every seemingly trivial clue, was connected to a larger network of events that no one could yet fully see. The feeling that the city was being watched, monitored, and influenced by unknown forces began to take hold. Even those who tried to remain skeptical, who believed in the rationality of events, began to notice patterns that could not be ignored, coincidences that were all too precise, signs that seemed intentional, and a sequence of events that transformed the population's daily lives in almost imperceptible but irrevocable ways. Initial investigations proved insufficient to understand the depth of the crime. Police, detectives, and security experts attempted to map out the events, but found only fragments of clues that led to new questions. Each discovery seemed to open doors to even greater mysteries, revealing that the crime had layers of complexity beyond immediate comprehension. The city, which until then had been seen as peaceful, became the stage for a narrative in which every street, every corner, and every house potentially held secrets that could be decisive in understanding what had truly happened. The perception of security turned to distrust, and each resident found themselves involved, consciously or not, in a silent journey of constant surveillance, analysis, and speculation. Furthermore, the emotional impact was immense. The victims' families lived in a constant state of alert, trying to balance the pain of absence with the hope of answers. The rest of the city felt the indirect effect of these events. Conversations became more cautious, laughter more restrained, and people began to realize that seemingly small decisions could directly influence their own safety. The transformation was both social and psychological, shaping the collective mindset in ways that remained invisible yet profoundly real. Every act of care, every decision not to cross a street late at night, every watchful eye toward the unknown was part of a silent adaptation to the new reality that was unfolding. And even with all the investigation, many elements remained unexplained. There were reports of phenomena that couldn't be easily understood, shadows that seemed to move on their own, objects that reappeared in different locations, signs indicating the presence of people where no one was. Every detail fueled theories and increased the fascination with the case. The city in this scenario wasn't just a witness. It actively participated in the narrative, shaping itself under the impact of the crime and the revelations that slowly emerged, almost as if it were alive, reacting to the forces operating behind the scenes, deciding together with the residents which elements of the truth would be perceived and which would remain hidden. What makes it all the more remarkable is that, despite all the attention focused on the events, every attempt to decipher the mystery of the crime seemed only to create new questions. The disappearances and unexplained events functioned like pieces of a complex puzzle, in which each element had multiple interpretations, and every decision made by the authorities or the public directly influenced the unfolding of events. The feeling that the complete truth was always one step beyond immediate reach created a constant tension, keeping the city in a state of emotional and mental alert that transformed even the simplest routine into something charged with meaning and mystery. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, exploring not only the central events, but also how the city, its streets, its institutions, and each individual involved began to reorganize themselves in the face of this new reality. Every habit, every decision, and every reaction began to carry weight and meaning, revealing how a crime, even when isolated in its initial moments, can trigger a ripple of impact that ripples through the entire community, shaping perceptions, decisions, and even collective identity itself. The hidden truth behind the disappearances transformed not only the perception of the crime itself, but also the way everyone interacted, reacted, and interpreted the world around them, creating a scenario in which fear, fascination, and reflection intertwined constantly and almost imperceptibly. Comment below. I'm on this journey too, and write which detail of the crime most affected your perception of the city and the mysterious events. Have you ever wondered how some organizations manage to operate in the shadows, shaping decisions, beliefs, and behaviors without most people realizing it? Secrets that no one dared speak of were kept under lock and key, but the crime that shook the entire city began to reveal frightening fragments, revealing that something much deeper and more disturbing was going on than any resident could have imagined. This was no ordinary network of influence or an isolated group. We were faced with a secret society, structured to exert power and control, manipulating perceptions, creating patterns of behavior, and above all, shaping a collective mindset that became increasingly vulnerable to its actions. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic so we can understand not only who these people were, but also how their beliefs, practices, and decisions began to impact the entire city. Imagine an organization that presents itself discreetly, almost invisible, while its members gathered in seemingly ordinary places, old houses, abandoned buildings, even social clubs. From the outside, nothing suggested that dark decisions and meticulously planned rituals were taking place. But inside, every gesture, every word, and every ritual carried enormous symbolic weight, connected to a logic of its own that defied the comprehension of those outside it. Every seemingly trivial detail was part of a sequence of actions that produced concrete and often frightening effects on the population and the surrounding environment. The impact of these practices was profound and multifaceted. The city, which had previously followed a predictable routine, began to undergo invisible, almost imperceptible transformations that altered habits, social relationships, and even the perception of safety. Decisions that seemed routine, such as street layouts, traffic schedules, and community meetings, began to reflect, albeit indirectly, the influence of this group. The presence of a secret society not only instilled fear, but also fascinated, because the way these people controlled information, shaped narratives, and kept secrets revealed a level of planning and discipline few dared imagine. The crime that sparked this entire investigation served as a window into the inner world of this cult. Fragments of clues, objects found in unusual places, and witness accounts began to piece together a puzzle that, while incomplete, showed that the city was not merely a passive setting, but rather part of a silent and complex experiment. Each ritual, each group decision, seemed to have its own internal logic, connecting the central crime to the behind-the-scenes of a network of power and influence that extended far beyond what was visible on the surface. The fascination stems precisely from this contrast between the appearance of normality and the hidden truth, a phenomenon that makes us reflect on how invisible decisions and secret beliefs can generate tangible and lasting impacts. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, exploring how the presence of this cult transformed the city's dynamics and the mindset of its inhabitants. The tension was palpable, not only because of the crime itself, but also because of the psychological effect of knowing that forces were operating beyond public control. Residents began to adapt their behaviors, question old habits, and become suspicious of even seemingly banal attitudes. Every choice, every step, was influenced by a sense of invisible surveillance and manipulation. The city thus became a silent laboratory of observation and impact, where individual and collective decisions were shaped by elements no one could fully understand. The cult's complexity wasn't limited to its beliefs. It extended to how people were recruited, instructed, and conditioned to obey. Each member carried within them a piece of the hidden truth, a piece of the puzzle that could transform a simple action into an event with profound consequences for the entire community. The journey to discover who these people were, what their motivations were, and how each ritual connected to the central crime began to reveal a level of planning and strategy that seemed almost supernatural, as if the entire city had been placed on a chessboard whose rules no one fully understood. The effects of this cult and its actions went far beyond the crime itself. The impact was reflected in the transformation of collective perception, the way residents interacted with one another, the way decisions were made, and even the local culture, which began to incorporate fears, superstitions, and reflections on invisible forces at work behind the scenes. Every corner, every house, and every square carried memories and echoes of this influence, reminding us that crime was not an isolated event, but part of a larger process of manipulation, power and control capable of shaping realities, mindsets, and life trajectories in a silent yet devastating way. Now, when we imagine the complexity of this group, the scale of the impact of their actions, and the scope of the crime that triggered it all, we can see that the city and its inhabitants were immersed in a reality where decisions, beliefs, and secrets intertwined in a web of impact, transformation, and mystery that still needed to be unraveled. Every detail, every partial revelation, every fragment of information contributed to a broader understanding of how invisible forces can alter not only the present, but also an entire community's perception of the past and future. Comment below. This makes sense to me, and tell me which aspect of this secret society most fascinated or disturbed you. What makes a story truly disturbing is not just the crime itself, but all the layers of mystery and complexity that unfold as we try to understand what really happened. Despite all the efforts, some questions still remain unanswered, and it is precisely this lack of clear explanations that makes the case so fascinating and simultaneously frightening. Official investigations began immediately after the first signs of abnormality, with police officers and crime experts trying to map out every detail. But they quickly realized they were dealing with something that went beyond conventional logic. What seemed like an isolated disappearance began to reveal connections, patterns, and secrets that no one could ignore, testing the limits of patience, reason, and perception of everyone involved. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, exploring how each step of the investigation seemed to open new doors to even greater mysteries. Police found inconsistencies in witness accounts. Objects appeared and disappeared without explanation, and documents and evidence surfaced in unexpected places, as if someone or something were invisibly manipulating the narrative. It was as if the city had become a stage of interconnected enigmas, where every decision made by investigators or citizens could alter the course of understanding the crime. The hidden truth seemed to elude them with every attempt to get closer, leaving a trail of fascination, tension, and unease that permeated not only the investigation's background, but also the minds of the entire population. Witnesses described events that challenged their perception of reality. Voices in the silence of the night, shadows moving inexplicably, and even objects that seemed to have been moved by invisible hands. Each account added a layer of complexity, a new piece to the puzzle that, though incomplete, indicated that the crime was not an isolated event, but part of a larger phenomenon with profound psychological and social impact. Investigators tried to rationalize every detail, but with each step, more doubts arose than certainties, demonstrating that some truths remain hidden, guarded by forces that cannot be fully understood through rational analysis or the collection of physical evidence alone. The challenge facing the authorities was enormous. Documents disappeared from archives, witnesses changed their stories, and each investigative scenario seemed to offer more questions than answers. The decisions made during this period became crucial not only for the course of the investigation, but also for how the entire city reacted to fear and uncertainty. Each investigative act revealed fragments of information that transformed the impact of the crime into something tangible, demonstrating how a partial truth can shape the perceptions of thousands of people. The journey to uncover the true extent of the case thus became a multi-layered narrative, where each element held strategic and symbolic importance, connecting the city's daily routine to the complexity of a mystery that still seemed greater than any possible explanation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, analyzing how psychological pressure, the relentless search for answers, and the perception of invisible forces began to affect not only the investigators, but the entire community. The silent tension that arose influenced simple decisions. Residents began locking their doors earlier, avoiding certain streets, and questioning even the presence of seemingly trustworthy neighbors. Every daily gesture carried greater weight, because fear and uncertainty shaped collective behavior invisibly, revealing how unresolved events can infiltrate routines, mindsets, and even local culture, creating a lasting impact that transcends the crime itself. Theories began to multiply as investigators encountered impossible gaps. Some suggested manipulation by the cult or secret society, while others hypothesized supernatural events, forces beyond rational comprehension, fragments of ancient history, forgotten documents, and accounts of long-ago residents began to be re-examined, creating a complex tapestry of suspicions, possibilities, and revelations that defied any definitive conclusion. The city at this point was no longer merely a setting, but an active participant in the narrative, shaping and being shaped by events silently but continuously, as if each individual decision echoed in the unfolding mystery. Furthermore, the emotional impact was undeniable. Each partial discovery, each promising clue, and each theory raised sparked a wave of reflection, fear, and fascination among those following the investigation. The perception of truth became subjective, and each resident began to interpret events based on personal experiences, rumors, or third-party accounts, creating a partial but powerful network of knowledge. The city, its inhabitants, and even the researchers themselves were immersed in a dynamic where each piece of information, each decision made, each observation made could alter collective understanding and shape the trajectory of a mystery that was still far from being fully revealed. Now, as we examine all these elements, accounts, fragments of evidence, inconsistencies, gaps, and theories, it's possible to see how the investigations and unsolved mysteries transformed the city into fertile ground for psychological impact, reflection on decisions, perception of hidden truths, and the creation of a collective mindset that's more attentive, more cautious, and at the same time more fascinated by the unknown. Every detail, no matter how small, connects to a larger web of meaning, influencing the journey of understanding for everyone involved, and leaving the entire city marked by an experience that blends fear, curiosity, and revelation. Comment below. This makes sense to me, and tell me which detail of the investigation surprised you the most or changed your perception of this mystery. No one in the city ever looked at their own neighborhood the same way again. Streets that were once walked with ease and familiarity began to carry an invisible weight, as if every corner concealed fragments of a truth no one could fully comprehend. Crime, which initially seemed isolated, began to reveal its impact at every level of the community, transforming behaviors, decisions, and even the collective mindset itself. The once serene population began to view neighbors, strangers, and even places once considered safe with suspicion, developing a heightened awareness that any detail could carry a hidden meaning. Every everyday gesture began to be analyzed in light of a traumatic experience everyone shared, creating a silent but profound effect on urban life and social interaction. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, so we can understand how crime shaped the city's dynamics in ways that go far beyond immediate fear. Authorities, pressured by the public and the media, had to rethink procedures, enforcement routines, and communication strategies. Every decision made by public agencies directly influenced the population's perception of security and, at the same time, revealed gaps in the understanding of what had actually happened. The city began to experience a silent transformation. Habits that were once natural became regulated by internal surveillance. Everyday decisions carried an underlying tension, and the local culture began to incorporate memories of distrust, alertness, and constant reflection. It was an impact that transcended crime, becoming part of the collective identity and history of everyone who lived there. The impact on the population was multifaceted. Old fears mixed with new questions, while the search for answers and the need for explanations shaped each individual's mindset. Schools, institutions, and families felt the weight of this transformation. Awareness programs, community meetings, and even changes in the way children and young people were instructed to act reflected the attempt to protect, but also to process, a reality that seemed to escape rational control. Every social event, every community decision carried the shadow of a crime that had invisible but powerful ramifications on how everyone interacted with one another. The journey of adaptation and emotional reconstruction began to blend with the need to understand, record, and preserve the memory of the events safely. Albeit fragmented, the local culture also underwent subtle but lasting changes. Stories about crime infiltrated everyday life, conversations, the narratives parents told their children, and references to places and people. The city began to live in two eras: what could be seen and what was hidden, what was concrete and what remained in the realm of assumptions and theories. This duality impacted the way residents made choices, as if each step was influenced by a hidden truth, capable of transforming a seemingly simple routine into something charged with meaning and consequence. Crime acted as a catalyst for a silent and profound transformation. capable of altering both individual perception and collective mindset, generating a cascade effect that shaped the city on multiple levels. Authorities and investigators also felt the weight of this impact. Every decision made at the official level began to be closely scrutinized by the population, which demanded answers and tangible results. The pressure mounted, and with it grew the need for transparency, innovation, and adaptation, transforming the way the city viewed security, social control, and the very logic of justice. Each new law, each preventive or regulatory measure, reflected not only an attempt to prevent further events, but also to restore a sense of order and balance that had been shaken by crime. The city found itself at an inflection point, where the traumatic experience of the past shaped present decisions and silently impacted the collective future. The emotional and social impact was evident in the small interactions of everyday life. Conversations on the streets, comments in shops, and encounters in squares carried nuances of distrust and caution, but also of curiosity and fascination with the unknown. Each person interpreted the events uniquely, connecting fragments of information, theories, and personal experiences. This subtle but powerful transformation generated a continuous effect of vigilance, reflection, and adaptation, revealing how the city, although marked by fear, was also engaged in a process of learning, observation, and redefining its own history. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, to analyze how this impact was reflected behind the scenes of everyday life, in behavioral patterns, in the decisions of individual citizens, and in the paths the city began to take as a result of crime. The transformation was not only external, but also internal. Mentalities changed, perceptions adjusted, and a new relationship between security, distrust, and control took hold. Every detail of the city, every public and private space, began to carry layers of meaning and memory that went far beyond what was visible, creating a complex landscape of interactions, reflections, and impacts that remained alive even with the passage of time. Comment below. I'm on this journey too, and tell me which effect of this crime you find most fascinating or disturbing in transforming the city and the mindset of its residents. What really happened that night? The answer may never be known, and it is precisely this uncertainty that keeps the mind curious, questioning, and at the same time, cautious. When dealing with unsolved mysteries, especially those involving crimes and secret societies, every detail, every account, and every fragment of information becomes a potential clue, but also an enigma that challenges us to interpret what lies beyond the surface. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, exploring how theories, rumors, and even elements bordering on the supernatural intertwine to construct a narrative that remains alive in the city's collective memory, even decades after the events. Some residents, including those who claim not to believe in invisible forces, report experiences that defy logic. Voices echoing in abandoned places, shadows moving without apparent origin, and a sense of presence when no one is around. Each account contributes to a web of possibilities that, while impossible to prove scientifically, carries a strong emotional impact. The entire city, in a sense, began to become a stage for alternative theories, where the line between reality and perception became increasingly blurred. And it is in this liminal space between the known and the unknown that the deepest reflections on decisions, mindset, and the impact of hidden forces on our daily lives emerge. Beyond individual experiences, there are popular theories that have circulated for years. Some based on verifiable facts, others fueled by rumors, suspicions, and subjective interpretations. Some believe that the cult responsible for the crime had such a deep network of influence that it could shape behavior, manipulate information, and even interfere with the decisions of local authorities. Others argue that the presence of supernatural elements, or a kind of hidden intelligence, explains events that defied conventional logic. Each theory, however unlikely it may seem, contributes to the construction of a collective narrative, to a partial understanding of a case that defies simple explanations. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, reflecting on how these mysteries impact how we interpret our own experiences and decisions. When we encounter a hidden, fragmented, or possibly manipulated truth, we are forced to question not only external events, but also our internal perceptions, how we react, how we decide, and how we position ourselves in the face of something that seems to escape our comprehension. It is this intersection between personal experience, partial information, and the possibility of unknown phenomena that gives the story a transformative dimension, demonstrating that often the impact of a crime or a secret society goes far beyond the direct victim, affecting the mindset, behavior, and perception of an entire community. Furthermore, the journey of reflection on theories and unsolved mysteries invites us to consider the weight of individual and collective decisions. Each testimony, each report of a strange event or a supernatural perception carries with it the possibility of altering interpretations, reconstructing memories, and, to some extent, influencing how the future is perceived. The psychological effect, emotional impact, and social repercussions of a crime are not limited to physical space or time. They extend to the depths of the collective consciousness, shaping a mindset that blends caution, fascination, and the need for understanding. The fascination with the inexplicable also reveals something profound about us as human beings: the need to seek patterns, find meaning, and give meaning to what seems random or incomprehensible. When we look at the events of that night, at the fragments of evidence, at the witness accounts, and at the rumors that still circulate, we realize that every attempt at explanation is also an attempt to maintain some control over the unknown, to understand the complexity of a reality that challenges us to go beyond what is visible. It is an exercise in perception, analysis, and reflection that touches both rationality and intuition, bringing us closer to the essence of how mystery stories impact cities, communities, and individuals. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, imagining scenarios and possibilities that have yet to be explored, and considering how each element of the narrative, be it factual, speculative, or seemingly supernatural, contributes to the transformation of collective perception. The city, marked by crime, secret societies, and unexplained events, has become a territory of constant reflection, where every decision made by residents, authorities, and investigators themselves reverberates on multiple levels, affecting mindsets, behaviors, and the very sense of reality. Each account, each fragment of information, and each theory adds layers of complexity that fuel the mystery, making it impossible to separate fact from interpretation, truth from perception, and reality from memory. Comment below, "This makes sense to me," and tell me which theory or mystery in this story most piqued your curiosity or changed your perception of the hidden truth that surrounds the city. And if you've made it this far, it means you've truly immersed yourself in this story, felt the suspense, reflected on the mysteries, and followed every detail we revealed together. It's precisely this kind of curiosity and engagement that keeps stories like this alive and allows us to continue bringing you content that sparks reflection, reveals behind-the-scenes details, and explores hidden truths about cases that have shaped cities and lives. So, if you felt this narrative added something to you, please leave a like. It's a natural way of acknowledging that we're on this journey together and that every detail we've explored here made sense. And since we're all connected on this dive into the unknown, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Here are the ideas to continue uncovering real cases, unexplained mysteries, and stories that defy logic, always with analysis, reflections, and details you'd rarely find elsewhere. Your presence here is what motivates us to bring you ever more relevant content, full of suspense, curiosity, and revelations that transform the way we see the world around us. If you'd like to leave a record of your presence in this video, comment below, "I'm with you until the end," or something that shows you followed every detail of this journey. It's a light-hearted way to interact, to connect with the story and with others who are also immersed in this same universe. And before we wrap up, here's a tip. There's a video here that complements this topic, full of new revelations and details that will further expand on what you've just seen. Click through and stay with me there, because the journey isn't over yet, and there's much more to discover about the mysteries that mark cities and lives.